themes that I was talking about this morning around collaboration and innovation. This is not a solution that is going to be solved by one sector of our world that is addressing the issue of youth homelessness. As you saw when everybody stood, we have service providers, youth, government, advocacy organizations, everybody together plays a vital role, and what has to happen is we need to be interwoven and interlocked in the strategy that we overwhelmingly put together to address this issue, and that's what this panel session is going to be about. Doing it a little bit different. It's going to be a little TED-style action going on here. We have 4 of our closest partners coming up on stage here to talk to you, and we could have invited so many more to be here, but we wanted to make sure you got out on time. So you're going to be hearing from people talking about the role of research and data, the role of advocacy, the role of government, and the role of funders. And some other areas that we could have included that are vitally important, the role of media, as I touched upon. So much needs to change in that space. The role of service providers. And the reason that there isn't a service provider up here is because we're very fortunate to have many service providers talking throughout the day about the work that they're doing in an innovative and smart and strategic way. We hope you enjoy this. We hope you enjoy the interactivity of it and the real intellect and brilliance of the people that we've invited to come up on here to speak today. So we are going to start first with Brian Samuels, who is the Executive Director of Chapin Hall and the former Commissioner of the Administration for Children, Youth, and Families at the Department of Health and Human Services.
So good morning. They're going to rack up a set of slides here. It's a really great opportunity to talk to you today. As some of you know, but for those who didn't, I was a political appointee in the Obama administration for 4.5 years. I was responsible for the runaway and homeless youth programs, the domestic violence programs, teen pregnancy prevention, and child welfare. It was a pretty profound opportunity to be a part of the administration and to work in D.C. But one of the most painful parts of that experience was to be an effective advocate for the most vulnerable, of which LGBTQ youth certainly fall into that category. And as Gregory and others have indicated, one of the real challenges here was that we didn't have reliable data that we could use to make a compelling argument for a change in policy, a change in direction, an increase in funds. Next slide. And that had a real detriment, so that although you saw considerable investments in a number of social service areas, you didn't see an investment here. In each instance, we tried to make the argument that the need was so great that the numbers shouldn't matter. That didn't work so good. But next slide. But if you compare the kind of impact good numbers have on funding, this is a great slide. So this slide here compares the amount of resources that HHS expends for children who are in the foster care system and have been removed from their homes. So that's that large blue bar there. It's $4.3 billion. That works out to a little under $12,000 per child. And then you can see last year that HHS spent $115 million across the entire country for runaway and homeless youth. So that means money for shelters, street outreach workers, and transitional living. That's currently the commitment from HHS and the Congress on addressing issues of runaway and homeless youth. Next slide. We have some data. We have some emerging process. One of the big commitments was to try to use the limited resources we already had to really fund and support an increase in the availability of data. So this is a slide that comes from work that's being done in LA. It focuses on kids in foster care who are also gay, lesbian, bisexual, transgendered, or questioning. And what it shows you here for the first time is, one, we have an estimate of the number of gay, lesbian, bisexual, and transgendered youth in the out-of-home care system in foster care. This study found that about 19% of youth fall into that set of categories. So it's for the first time we're beginning to get our arms around the dimensions of the issues and starting to get our arms around how we begin to shape policy that reflects the numbers. Next slide. And so what this slide does is, for the first time, describe, I think, in a broader public setting, work that we're going to be doing going forward. So about a year ago, I left the administration and went back home to run the research center. I took with me a great commitment to the issue of runaway and homeless youth, and particularly developing an accurate estimate of exactly how many young people are out there so that we can begin to shape the way the policies are being implemented as well as the resources. And so we have spent the last year raising funds so that we could do a nationwide estimate, all 50 states, Puerto Rico, and DC, on the number of runaway and homeless youth. And obviously, part of that process will be identifying the vulnerable populations, including LGBTQ youth. So this strategy calls on, first, that we do a much better job in the point-in-time count. That's an important aspect of the count, but it's not by itself reliable. We're also looking at doing a national household survey where we can learn, in the largest sense, exactly how many kids are exiting their homes to running away. And while that won't tell us how many young people are actually on the street, it will take us a long way in that direction. Another component of it is a wide-ranging set of qualitative interviews so that we can hear from youth in their own language their experience, and we can begin to use that as data to drive the way we make decisions and to make the case for a different set of supports for young people who are also homeless. In that work, if all we had is data but we don't actually have a way of describing what young people need, we wouldn't go as far as we want. So the other component of this work is making sure that we look at all of the available literature to identify any effective programs that target homeless youth, so that we can not only say the size of the population, but we can also say these are the set of needs and here's what we know about effectively intervening to prevent homelessness or to eliminate it. And then we'll also finish out by taking all of that data and all of that research and making the case for specific changes in federal policy so that we can better align the policies with the actual needs of young people. And so I'll close just by making two really quick points. The estimate is it'll take us about $4 million to do this work. We have spent the last year talking to lots of funders. So far, we have $2.5 million. So we think we have enough to begin this work. We don't have enough to do everything, but we certainly have enough to do the core. And we'll continue to raise funds as needed to complete the work. So, we all have a contribution to make. And certainly the folks in this room are making that contribution. I feel like, this is the contribution that the research community can make to this area, and ultimately a contribution that we can make to the issues that you care most about. The other point about that $2.5 million is the largest funder in that $2.5 million is us. So we put our own money on the table because we wanted to demonstrate to people that we were committed to this issue. And so a little bit less than 50% of it is our own money. So it's a big commitment. And last point would be the True Colors partnership You know, we've worked with Gregory and Jema and a number of others in the organization quite extensively to make sure that as we go about doing this work, the most vulnerable populations, including the LGBTQ populations, are accurately documented in terms of needs and capacity, and ultimately we figure out solutions that really can be tailored to meet their needs. And so this partnership is a substantive one. We have lots of emails going back and forth, and I would imagine over the next 2 years we will get even closer together, because we can't do this work and do it right without doing it with partners, and True Colors is as good a partner as there is out there. So thanks.
Thank you very much, Brian. And so now we're going to move on to the role of advocacy with Darla Bardine, who is the Executive Director of the National Network for Youth.
As some of you here know, the National Network for Youth office is embedded in a homeless youth program on Capitol Hill. And I commute to work using DC's lovely metro system. And what this means is, during my morning commute, I'm on the train with men and women who work for members of U.S. Congress. And if any of you have spent significant time on a subway, I'm sure you have encountered people who jump up on trains or hop on trains and give speeches, whether it's about religion or political beliefs, right? You all have experienced this. So occasionally in the morning, I have visions of myself jumping up on these metro cars full of congressional aides declaring the crisis of youth homelessness in America, because I think maybe they just don't know, right? And if I could do that like 3 or 4 mornings a week, in 6 months I could make some serious progress. Then I remind myself that metro declarations is probably not the best way to build relationships and educate congressional staff. And then I also remind myself and remember you all, our partners in this work, and I know that I'm not alone in this work, and that we all have an important part to play in ending youth homelessness in America, inclusive of LGBT youth. And I believe that we can make significant strides forward in ending youth homelessness in America, and that federal policy has an important part to play. It's not the only part, but I think it's a part with a lot of potential. In the summer of 2013, I launched a group to work on the reauthorization of the Runaway and Homeless Youth Act. In case you don't know, it's a 40-year-old federal legislation that funded most of the homeless youth programs that exist across the United States today. Next slide. Oh, good. No, back. I was surprised and overwhelmed by the number of different advocates from different sectors that came together. They brought their piece, their expertise to work on these recommendations to figure out what should be, how should we update the Runaway and Homeless Youth Act. And it wasn't easy work, right? We had debates about what exactly should the nitty-gritty recommendations be, and certainly debates about what were the top priorities, right? Because there were so many different things we wanted to do with this legislation, but what could we do feasibly? What were the top priorities, and what were kind of the mid to like lower priorities? Collaboration and coordination is always extra work, right? It always takes thinking outside of ourselves and our organizations, but with the right group of committed people, the fruit of collaborative work can be great. And it's out of this ad hoc working group that Gregory and I formed such a close partnership and a relationship. So that to the extent that True Colors Fund and the National Network for Youth are kind of one unit working on the reauthorization of the Runaway and Homeless Youth Act. Gregory and I are on the phone mostly every day, sometimes 3 to 4 times, and there has been fruit from this collaboration. With our partners, we've been able to get a strong bipartisan reauthorization bill introduced in the Senate, passed through, yes. Woo! It has key updates updates key changes. It extends the length of stay for basic center programs. It includes a comprehensive non-discrimination clause, and on and on and on. See me for details later, or Gregory. And just 2 weeks ago, there was a strong bipartisan vote out of the Senate Judiciary Committee, which means the next stop for this bill is a full vote on the Senate floor. And I truly believe that neither one of us could have accomplished this alone, and it took everybody, including people in this room, to make all of these things happen. And because of our commitment to collaboration, Gregory and I launched the National Coalition for Homeless Youth, which you saw the logo in the video. And communication and collaboration, next slide please. And communication and collaboration is our goal, right? It's to bring together all the different organizations, all the national organizations from different sectors who are committed to ending youth homelessness and want to work together to get on the same page so that we're all proclaiming the same message at the same time using very colorful bullhorns to Congress. Because that's what it's going to take to get progress and to make progress. Because what federal policy can do is important. Federal policy can make it illegal for federal money to be used to discriminate against young people based on their sexual orientation or gender identity. Federal policy can tell homeless youth who are often ignored that they matter, that they have value, by providing the resources they need to exit homelessness and enter adulthood with safety, support, and opportunities. Federal policy can acknowledge that youth are different than adults, and therefore the services and the housing interventions need to be youth appropriate, not a mini adult version. These resources need to be allocated in urban centers, the suburbs, but especially in rural communities where often social services in general are severely lacking. Yes, there is a lot of work that needs to be done. And one person or one organization cannot get us from where we are today to where we need to be, to the place where every community acknowledges that they have homeless youth and then act to provide youth-appropriate and inclusive services and housing. I invite all of you to join the movement to end youth homelessness. And if you've already joined the movement, and I imagine that most of you already have, then I challenge you and myself to invite others to join this movement with us. Because it's going to take more than just those in this room. It's going to take other people that we continue to bring into this movement to elevate and raise this issue. And educate your federal, state, and local policymakers. Write letters, make phone calls, have meetings, invite them to site visits. And whenever I send you an email, or Gregory or one of the other partners here, and we say this is a good time to educate your members of Congress about the value of this federal program in their community, that really is a good time to do that. We're not lying. Please do it, because I'm not a constituent of 50 states. I'm actually a constituent of D.C., which doesn't really mean a whole lot. So please, we have a 40-year history of providing youth-appropriate services to young people. Today, young people are receiving the services and care that they need, but it's not enough. And I believe that together, we can create a safety net where one doesn't exist, and we can strengthen the safety net where it's weak. Together, let's end youth homelessness.
So much, Darla. And now, to talk about the role of government, please welcome Laura Zeilinger, the Executive Director of the U.S. Interagency Council on Homelessness.
Thank you. So Gregory gave me a pretty broad topic to talk about, the role of government. We've been debating the role of government since the beginning of our republic. And when we think about where we are now on youth homelessness and the role of government in fighting and to end all homelessness among youth, we are really part of an evolution. We are making progress. We have a lot more work to do. And it's helpful to think about that in the context of where we've come as a nation and fight for equality. Our Declaration of Independence provides the says that the role of government is to secure the fundamental and inalienable rights to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Well, without a home, one's ability to, and one's security of their life and liberty is certainly in jeopardy, let alone their ability to actually pursue happiness. So because of that, homelessness generally, but youth homelessness in particular, is a social justice issue. So we can learn from where we've come as a nation on other social justice issues to inform what it is we can do and how we use government in order to end youth homelessness. For example, we can learn from the fight, we can learn for racial equality. We came from an ugly history of slavery and overcame that. We have overcome legalized segregation, and we won the right to vote. We elected President Barack Obama, who I have this distinct honor to serve, yet we still have Ferguson today, and growing injustice and disparity. 40%, 12.5% of the U.S. population in 2012 was identified as African American or black. But people who are African American or black made up 40% of those staying in shelter. So Dr. King said all of this much more eloquently and much shorter. He said that the arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends towards justice. But try telling Ben or other young people who are come out or are transgender and kicked out of their homes and have no place to be that it's going to take time. Try telling a young person who has to decide whether to spend another night where they are and face abuse over and over again, or try to make it out in the world on their own. In our towns and cities throughout our country, there are thousands of young people who face trauma, and exploitation, and all kinds of horrific things, and we have to do better. We need to create, government has a role in creating the universe of safety, stable housing, opportunities for education and employment, and well-being. But we need to be able to connect these resources that we have in a meaningful and systematic way so that they work for people. We need to work, as we've said, smarter. Yes, we need better data. Absolutely. We need better data to make the case for more resources, but we are not starting from zero. We can take action today. We can identify the touch points that are out there where we are coming into contact with youth every day who can benefit from those relationships and we can provide help through that. But we need to get our mainstream programs working in order to do this. Yes, we need mainstream programs, and we absolutely need targeted homeless programs. We need to increase the funding for RIA. We need continuum of care and McKinney-Vento dollars. But we also need to solve the fact that in each program, people are operating within their own scope of educational system, juvenile justice system, child protective services system, and they all are touching and have some responsibility in the way that they're serving youth, but it is limited by their program. And nobody, while everybody has some little amount of responsibility, often there is nobody who is responsible for the whole. And we're missing the opportunity to really make a difference when we don't put those systems in place. We are failing if we don't fix this, and it is the job of government to fix it. So at USICH, our mission is to coordinate we have this awesome and huge mission, right? To coordinate the federal response to homelessness, to work across 19 federal agencies in partnership with states, communities, and the private sector to prevent and end homelessness. And within that, we have the goal, of course, of ending youth homelessness. But and in the work that we're doing, I've learned a few things where we are also constantly evolving, but I want to share with you what I think is the secret sauce to systems change and solving complex problems in an interagency space. And so I'm going to ask you to indulge me the secret sauce metaphor for a moment. First, you have to know your ingredients. You need to understand individually what people bring to the table, but also you need to understand how to bring people together. We need to be able to then define the problem. We need to be able to say clearly what it is that we're doing well, and even when programs are operating well, when we look at their outcomes on their own, we need to be able to see and understand, are they operating, what can we do to create the kind of coordination and put youth at the center of our work and shift from this program-centered to a person-centered model. And by doing that, we need to establish a clear and shared vision of how we get from the array of programs and separate systems that we have right now to something that actually works like a system to serve youth who are homeless and help them exit homelessness. And so when you're establishing this shared vision, you need to be able to invite all of the cooks into the kitchen. And because if you don't have buy-in, you will go nowhere. And from that, you need to be able to create an action plan to get from where you are to where you are going, and everybody needs to be a part of that, because what it might seem like the most straightforward path for one agency or one entity may not be. They may be limited by will or by resources or statute. For example, we may say that housing is health care, but it does not mean that we can make Medicaid pay for housing. So we need everybody together to agree. And then we need to document, create action plans and systems of accountability in order to actually deliver on those things. And through that planning process and through the definition of actions and accountability to implement in the actions, we need to invite people in and hear from them to understand how things really work on the ground and where we're missing the boat. Because if we're not tasting the ingredients, something just might be rotten, and we need to know that early on. We are doing this together with communities through the release of the youth framework, the youth intervention model, our performance plan, and if you can't fix the whole thing at once, you have to start somewhere with pilots, with testing things out so that you can move things forward, but move quickly to take things to a broader level, working in partnership with stakeholders. So I will share with you one other quote from Dr. King that sits on my computer monitor and serves me daily, which is that there is nothing more dangerous than sincere ignorance or conscientious stupidity. That we often know that we have a history of ignorance, of believing that somehow people are inferior or wicked or bad because of some characteristics that they portray. And we also have a history of some kind of stupidity or dangerous beliefs that somehow that we can't change this, or that some people just must choose to be homeless, or they're lazy, or they don't want a job, or they don't want our help, or they choose to be gay, or their love is not equal, or if recognized threatens my family values. And if we don't act, then we risk that this ignorance ferments into conscientious stupidity, and in the form of government that could look like inertia. But we know that our Constitution tells us that government is the collective will of the people. It is we the people, for the people, by the people, which is why the staff at the council are partners like Anna Leva at HUD, Joyce from HHS, Brian, who's here from the Department of Labor, Ashley from USDA, are all here knowing that we're influenced by you and working in partnership with you, and researchers like Chapin Hall, advocates like National Network for Youth, funders like the group at Funders Together, and most certainly True Colors, who are raising our awareness, providing essential services, and helping us see all the things that need to be done. Thank you.
Thank you, Laura. So now, to discuss the role of philanthropy, please welcome Ann Miskey, the Executive Director of Funders Together to End Homelessness.
Reaction. You put a little bit of chemical catalyst into a beaker and you have a pretty cool effect. Now you probably are going, why in the world is she showing me a chemical experiment when we're talking about youth homelessness? Well, I represent an organization called Funders Together to End Homelessness. We are a national network of foundations and United Ways that believe that philanthropy can and must be a catalyst to end homelessness. We must be a catalyst to end youth homelessness. We must be a catalyst to end LGBT homelessness. The fact is that there are way too many young people in our country who are homeless. Some studies say it's in the millions, others in the hundreds of thousands or the tens of thousands. The fact of the matter is that any number over 0 is too many. But that the fact that it exists isn't because we don't care. All you have to do is look around this room and see the individuals here and the organizations that are represented to know that people care. And I can tell you that philanthropy cares. I know funders all over the country who truly do care. But sadly, caring is not enough. And doing what makes us feel good is also not enough. What we have to have is caring that shows itself in effective action. Funders around the country fund programs, and they fund some really good programs for our youth. But the fact is, we haven't done enough to actually connect these programs and to connect these programs with systems like healthcare or education or employment, things that are truly going to help our young people get ahead. And too often the programs we have are neither inclusive, nor do they listen to the voice of our youth. They do not respect or affirm who our youth are. So if you look around the country, you may say things look pretty bleak. I would suggest to you that we are actually at a moment of tremendous opportunity in this country. We are at a kairos moment. Kairos is the Greek word that means that exact moment in time when everything comes together. When all the fibers in the threads come together so that they can go through the eye of that needle. We are at that moment. We have an administration that cares about youth and about youth homelessness. We have advocates who are out there working really hard to make sure that we have the policies that we need. We have researchers. We have service providers. We have philanthropists. And above all, we have our youth who are saying now is the moment. This is our kairos moment. But I'm here today to talk about philanthropy and the role that philanthropy can and must play. So how can funders be catalysts? How can they seize this moment? Well, let's start with the dreaded A word. The word that funders are terrified of, and that's advocacy. Funders must be a voice to call for better policy, for more funding, and for evidence-based practices. And if funders can't, because of legal restrictions, put their mouth where their money is, then they need to fund those organizations that can. They need to fund the National Network for Youth. They need to fund the National Alliance to End Homelessness. They need to fund True Colors and let those people speak loudly. Another thing funders can do and must do is partner with government. Now, we don't have nearly the amount of money that government has. We're this drop in the bucket compared to the big coffers of government. But our money is flexible, it can be innovative, and it can fill in the gaps that government can't pay for. Funders Together was really fortunate last year to partner with the federal government, working with the USICH, on a project called Youth Count, to look at 9 communities around the country to figure out a better way to count and identify our youth. A great opportunity for philanthropy to work with government. Now, I bet that none of you thought that catalytic reactions were sexy until you saw the film. Okay? Data is exactly the same. Funders like to fund programs. They love the warm and fuzzy. But the fact of the matter is data and research can make such a huge difference. We need to fund data. We need to fund Brian and his project at Chapin Hall. We need to fund the research that the National Alliance is doing. Because data is not about facts and figures and charts and graphs. Data is about people. It's about who they are, what they need, and what we can do to support them. We must fund data. Now, programs. Anybody here think that funders like programs? I always picture them kind of like that dog. I don't know if you've ever seen the movie Up, the dog, and he's looking at a squirrel. Funders are like that with programs. What's new and shiny, they want to be there. And programs are good, don't get me wrong. We have to continue to support the programs that you folks are doing out in the communities. But we have to look beyond the program to the system. How do we build the capacity of the system? How do we connect those programs? How do we connect them to government? How do we make sure that a young person enters that system, is quickly helped, and is quickly put on a path to success? We need to think beyond the program. And there's another thing that funders have to do and are responsible for. And that is ensuring that what they support and what they fund is inclusive, is respectful, and affirms every young person that comes through the door of their program. I would like to say a special thank you to Gregory and True Colors, because they have shone a light on something that 2 years ago I didn't know anything about. I didn't know that 40% of our homeless young people were LGBT. That is something we need to know, and our funders around the country need to not only know that, but be committed to ensuring that the programs they support are inclusive. And we're going to continue to work with Gregory to make sure that all of our funders are on side with that.